Welcome to Creepypasta Theater, a show where we explore the strange world of creepypasta. Join us as we hear tales best left untold, travel roads best left unexplored, and see sights best left unseen. Photography is a wondrous thing. It allows us to preserve our treasured memories, capture a record of a fleeting moment, and create stunning works of art, from the simplicity of a self-portrait to the beauty of a sunset. But photography can have a dark side as well. In this episode, we'll be taking a look at 3 creepypastas about photographs. These stories can be found on creepypasta.fandom.com and are protected by Creative Commons license. The Girl in the Photograph. Author unknown. One school day, a boy named Tom was sitting at his desk by the window, doing math. It was 6 more minutes until school ended. He was doing his homework, and something caught his eye. Looking at the grass outside, he thought he saw a picture. When school was over, he ran outside fast so no one else could grab it. He picked it up and smiled. It was an image of the most beautiful girl he had ever seen. She had a dress with tights on and red shoes. Her hand was formed into a peace sign. She was so beautiful that he wanted to meet her. So he ran all over school asking everyone if they knew her or had seen her before. But everyone he asked said no. He was devastated. When he got home, he asked his older sister if she knew the girl. But unfortunately, she also said no. At this point, it was very late, so he walked upstairs, placed the picture on his bedside table, and went to sleep. In the middle of the night, Tom was awakened by a tap on his window, like a fingernail. It scared him. After the tapping, he heard a giggle. He saw a shadow outside, so he got out of bed, walked toward it, opened the window, and listened for the giggling. By the time he reached the glass, it was gone. The next day, he asked his neighbors if they knew the girl. Nobody did. When his mother came home, he even asked her if she knew. She said no. Saddened, he went to his room, placed the picture on his desk, and fell asleep. Once again, he was awakened by a tapping. Taking the picture, he followed the giggling outside. He walked across the road when suddenly he was hit by a car. He was dead on impact. The picture still in his hand. The driver got out of the car to help the boy, but it was too late. He could only pick up and view the picture he was holding. He saw a cute girl holding up 3 fingers. Tower of Silence. Author unknown. Imagine, if you will, a picture of a stone pit in a jungle surrounded by dead and bloated bodies. This image is responsible for a story known as the Tower of Silence. Indian officials ventured into a deep jungle, investigating several missing person reports from a nearby city. What they found was a Tower of Silence, or Dakma. Zoroastrians used these sites to dispose of dead bodies in the open air. While sites like this are not uncommon in certain parts of India, several strange things hint at something more unusual. None of the bodies depicted in the photograph were identified. Villagers from nearby, though initially surprised at the sheer number of corpses, proved unable to recognize the bodies. The corpses also do not match the descriptions of the missing people. There were no animals around except for maggots and flies. Zoroastrians rely on birds, like buzzards, to dispose of the bodies, in the belief that they are contributing back to the earth. But officials found the corpses relatively untouched by any sort of animal. There is no official count of the bodies. In fact, little work was actually accomplished at the site, and perhaps this is why only one photograph has emerged. Officials avoided the spot, not only because they felt uneasy looking at it, but for several other reasons as well. The deep pit at the center of the photograph was filled with several feet of festering blood, far more than the bodies outside could ever supply. The stench was so unbearable that many of the officials began to get nauseous when they first approached the Dakma. The expedition was ended when a villager accidentally kicked a small bone into the pit, penetrating the coagulated surface of the pool. A massive burst of gas from decomposing blood erupted from the pit, splashing those looking into it, along with the photographer. Those caught in the explosion were immediately sent to the hospital, where they were quarantined for possible infection. They became delirious with fever, shouting about being tainted with the blood of Ahriman, the personification of evil in Zoroastrianism, despite never having admitted having any familiarity with the religion. In fact, many of them had no idea what the Dakma was when they found it. Delirium turned into insanity, as many began to attack hospital staff until they were sedated. The fever eventually killed all of them. When officials returned with hazmat gear the following day, the site was empty. All of the bodies had been removed, and astonishingly, the pool of blood in the pit had been drained. All that remains of this incident is the photograph. Don't use Polaroids owned by dead people. Author unknown. I'm not sure where to begin with this besides designated it as a warning. About 6 months ago, I purchased a Polaroid land camera along with some SX70 film from eBay. I know. Really? eBay? Listen, it's not that important that eBay was involved. This is just how I found a guy willing to sell it to me cheap. Without poking him too much for more information about the camera and any damages it had received during its lifespan. He was diligent in response, admitting that he only knew it had belonged to a family friend who died of pneumonia last week. The guy had a massive collection of cameras and stereos, some briefcase record players that still played, and other photography and videography equipment. He had been left everything by the man and finally decided to clean things out and give the equipment to film or photography students or hobbyists to make some extra food money. Feeling satisfied with the brief information, I bought the camera for a fair $30, smiling over helping out a random person, even if it is just a small portion of what he needs. In the meantime, I had to search out for cheap film that wouldn't leave me broke as a joke each and every time I needed to replace the cartridge. When in doubt, leave it to overseas having the new stuff. And I know what you're thinking. Oh, God. Don't say you read creepy stories. Yes, I'm pretty active when it comes to Reddit, Let's Not Meet, and No Sleep. I came across a paranormal board talking about tech items being possessed by deceased proprietors. Seeing that the camera I bought was owned by a dead man, I decided to humor myself with some horror stories about classic cameras. One girl posted about how, no matter who takes her picture with her Instax, her face alone is blurred out like it had been overexposed in a focused spot. She was given it from her cousin after he was handed it down from his dead sister who had died on impact during a violent and fiery crash collision. He didn't find anything about the camera interesting, and he felt that his sister would be more proud of him if he gave it to a loving owner. I decided to try to find the crash, but it turns out a lot of fatal collisions occur where the original poster lived. But I thought I got close. A young woman was thrown from her vehicle after colliding with a steel lamppost. She had slid across the tarmac on her belly and her face. The skid left her with the skin on her face barely hanging on her chin, like she had worn a mask over her skull. The original poster had already long since connected the dots after she did her own research. She says she just won't take photos of herself with it. Chills went down my spine and I laughed a bit panicked. Whoa, her whole face? That's what it took to possess the small Polaroid that survived the crash? I shuddered again and put my laptop to sleep, deciding that mine was probably haunted in some way. What would a photographer do if he possessed his camera anyway? Take portraits, landscapes, waste my film? I was becoming a bit hopeful of the possible paranormal activity, wanting to have a way to prove it to my heckler of a dad. Ghosts aren't real, he tells me, just like God. While I can't really argue with the religious statement, I don't see any paranormal activity as a religious-connected topic. If anything, paranormal is like an overlapping plane. For the sake of understanding how I perceive these paranormal events and why I react as I do, I'm going to give a short example of why it's not a religious subject. There are multiple planes of existence, and all of them can overlap one another. Living plane, where all present living creatures exist, is a solid plane, referred to as reality, where everything can be touched or physically interacted with. While an intercepting plane, spiritual plane, or limbo is a fluid plane where beings exist not as physical beings, but as electromagnetic radiation. This fluidity and flexibility is what allows for it to cross into our plane. And the electromagnetic radiation is how we are able to witness events like poltergeist activity and hauntings. The people are only physically dead. Every electrical signal that passed through their nerves is now free energy floating through the electric field that exists everywhere, which in turn can lead to possessed electronics. Now that that's done, it's time to test if this thing can take photos. I had to purchase a charge flash for my camera, being the cheapest and easiest to replace once all charges pop. Hooking it into the top and hooping the neck strap over my head, I grabbed a soda and headed out back to take some test photos. I mainly used an old wilting oak as my focal point, trying out different positions to see how much light was good enough for a clean, crisp picture. The first 5 prints were heavily exposed, the shutter speed being too slow. But the last 3 prints, I could see a 0 shadowed over figure behind the oak, about 20 feet from my yard. I looked at the same spot as in the photo, seeing nothing that would make that shape. Nor did I see anyone walking around. I brushed it off as Polaroids can make almost anything look like a person if you shake while photographing. And I'm pretty guilty of uncontrollable shaking. The next pack of film arrived in time for me to take it house sitting with me. This is when the paranormal encouragement was heavily regretted. For a long time, my grandparents would tell us, myself and my brother, that they have heard footsteps walk from the back bedroom door all the way into the kitchen over the squeaky loose board. And that would be it for the night. I happened to catch ear one night while staying there of what I assumed could have been footsteps. Feeling brilliant, I decided to snap 2 photos of the hallway, one then and one again in an hour. I left them to fully develop on the kitchen counter and tucked myself into bed. Those photos. I burned them and I burned the camera. The face in the hallway was enough for me to know there was something wrong with the camera. In the photos taken before my grandparents, it appeared to look like their euthanized dog had been the footstepper and was showing he was still chilling nearby. But my photos. In it stood a completely black figure, gaunt and lanky like a skeleton wrapped in nylons, with a pair of pinhole white eyes and a wide, ear-to-ear toothy smile that could open his head in half. I couldn't handle the thought of checking to see if it's still sitting in the fire pit. The shadow might be furious with me if it isn't ashes. And I don't want to see that horrid face ever again. I'd gladly be blinded, so long as that horrifying face stays gone. You have been listening to a presentation of Point of Insanity Game Studio. Visit us on the web at www.poigamestudio.com. Follow me on most social media sites at POI Game Studio. And check out my music channel on YouTube at Al Seeger Music.